There was one more friend we all had in common, Hanazawa. He was 3 years older than us, so he would silently guide our unruly and rambunctious group. If Hanazawa said something, even that animal Kawase would obediently listen. Even now, Kawase would lower his eyes if he heard Hanazawa's name. Hanazawa, who was the first of us to graduate from middle school, left Aizu as a boy to enroll in a military academy. We hadn't seen or heard from him in 8 years. Is he the guy from the opening with the military uniform?
もしかしたらminakamiのやつ、昨日花沢に会ってたのかもしれない。旧友に会いに行くと言っていた。
いや、それはないよ。
きっとそうだ。私たち以外の旧友なんて花沢しかないだろ
う。嘘でもついたのか
な。嘘？
For some reason, Kawase's smile suddenly widened.
例えば女に会うとか。その女は本当にただの知人で、君に嫉妬させたくないから。
What are you guys doing just talking about this here? I mean, I guess I understand, but you could just meet up with him and ask.
だからさっきから嫉妬とか女とか何なのだ。私はminakamiにそういう意味で好かれているとは思っていない。
That's true. The woman doth protest too much. Protest too much. That thing, right? Why are you bringing up so much, man? Something you're hiding. And I also didn't think Minakami had met some woman. Kawase's smile got even wider. Now you're just hiding your own feelings, aren't you?
鈍感にも程があるだろ君。それともただ単に認めたくないだけかな。
何？
だってよく考えてみなよ。いくら病的な愛書家だってつまらない話を手放して喜べるわけないだろう。美食家が美食しか食わないようにね。
何が言いたいのだ。私はバカだからさっぱりわからん。
だからさっきも言ったけど、minakamiは君が好きなんだよ。君がクソみたいな小説を書こうと適当に喜べば、君の機嫌を取れると思っている。
Your shit stories.
意味がわからん。
Oh, Tamamori.
愚鈍だね。奴が君を褒めるのはおべっかだと言いたい。
No, man. You should listen to his voice. I'm sure he's genuine.
おべっか？
minakamiは君を喜ばせるために、君の原稿を楽しむふりをしていたということさ。
だが待て、ならminakamiは私のどこに惹かれたと言うんだ。
Okay.
私の魅力は奇想天外な空想力でできていると思っている。しかしその魅力を否定するなら、minakamiは一体私のどこに惹かれたというのだ？
それは
Good counter.
そうだね。君にいいところなんて。
That is martyr. You're martyring yourself, but for a good cause. Maybe it was worth it. Kawase's serious face looked unusually perplexed. When I realized he was making that expression because he was trying so hard to figure out what Minakami found so great about me, I felt like Kawase was looking at the face of a worthless idiot. Still, I never thought the first argument I'd ever win against Kawase would be over something like this. No matter how long I waited for his comeback, it didn't seem to be on its way. I honestly wished he would object, but I wouldn't have been able to stand that either. Well, I can say one thing, your eyes are very, very blue, Tamamori, so you have that going for you.
ともかくいい加減にしろ、カゼ。お前だって認めたくないだけだろ。
And you're wearing some nice glasses also, so I'll give that as well.
ちょっと黙っててよ。今必死に探してるんだから。玉森くんのいいところさ。
minakamiがこっそり花沢と会っていることに嫉妬して、お前は事実無根を述べている。
なんだって？
お前はminakamiに嫉妬している。
違う。撤回しろ。
You're wrong! Take that back!
めめしいな、お前も。
いい加減黙れよ、君。
Boy, did we both have mud on our faces. When we realized neither of us had a leg left to stand on, we both fell silent. Then, we looked up out the window and sighed.
暇だな。
暇だね。
うん。
こうも苛立つのは低気圧のせいだ。
いつまで続くんだろうね。
The story takes place in June. It's actually June now. Afterwards, Kawase left the cafe to go to his lectures at the Imperial University, and I was left to pass the time on my own. Whenever I was left alone like this, I would usually recall Kawase's annoying face and brood. Why? But for once, the one on my mind was Minakami. Just who was the old friend he met up with yesterday? This was Minakami, so I didn't think he would have plans to see a woman. He couldn't even look Madame Oizumi directly in the eye. There was just no way. He's scared of women? Therefore, the most probable person was Hanazawa. It could only be him. But, if Minakami really had been going to meet up with him, why hadn't he told me anything about it? How cold. It made me sort of uncomfortable. The waitress suddenly brought out my omelette rice.
遅いぞ。
Wow.
すみません。忘れてました。
Yeah, your hot friend isn't here anymore, so we just don't give a shit about you. Compared to how she was with Kawase, her attitude towards me was totally different. I stuffed my mouth with omelette rice as I stared out the window.
なんだ、まだいたのか。
あなたと帝大生さんって一体どんな関係なんですか？
I immediately knew what her intentions were.
友人だ。
じゃあどこにお住みか知ってます？
Don't tell her.
知ってどうする。
Those are the eyes of a stalker.
カルスピお付けします。
She set the cowspeed in her hand down with a clunk.
本郷三丁目に大きめの洋館があるだろう。わからなければ近所のやつに池田邸はどこですかと問えばすぐに教えてくれる。
Just, you are bought so easily.
そこにお住まいで？
家族の邸宅だ。知らぬ者はおらんだろうな。
そうなんですか。家族の家なんて憧れる。女中さんとか執事とかさぞかしたくさん雇ってるんだろうな。
いや、一人だ。
家族の大きい邸宅にたったお一人？
We're lying. I know it. We're lying.
ああ、わけあって今は一人で。
Wait, what was I going on about? I emptied my glass in one gulp and gave it back to the waitress, then shooed her away with the back of my hand. What?
割に合わなくないですか？もっと詳しく聞かせてくださいよ。
無理に言って奴に見つかるようなことはするなよ。私から言えるのはそれだけだ。
わかりました。ありがとうございます。
The waitress said, leaving in a huff. Man, her voice is so... What voice direction was this? Hey dudes, lady, you gotta sound like the most annoying, petulant little child. She was definitely going to go to Kawase's house. I didn't know what she would do when she got there, but it would be pretty funny if she ended up bothering him somehow. Still, what exactly did that waitress see in Kawase? There was what had happened yesterday, and now she wanted to get even closer to him. What a freak! Haruhiko-san and the frogman suddenly appeared in front of me.
ずいぶん長い昼休憩だな。
春彦さんとカエル男。
君はあの女給を気にしているようだな。
別に特別な気持ちはありません。確かに可愛い子だとは思っていましたが、ちょっと違和感を感じるというか。
違和感？
Yeah, there's definitely something off. I looked at the waitress's back.
あれ、カツラですよね。
カエル男、見てきなさい。
The frogman waddled closer to the waitress, and when he was right behind her, his eyes got even wider. Haruhiko-san and I both lowered our glasses, looked through the lenses, and confirmed what the frogman saw.
昨日カーセに掴まれたのを見ておかしいと思ったんです。
玉森君、確かに彼女は2つの髪質を持っているようだ。何か事情がありそうだな。
The frogman returned at that moment, and Haruhiko-san and I both fixed our glasses.
不思議だ。
髪は女の命という。美しく保つふりをするのも大変だな。
やはりそういうことですか。
Love came from a woman's gallant efforts. Kawase telling her to cut it was just sad. The waitress suddenly turned around. I thought long hair was cuter than short. When I confirmed that with my stare, the waitress frowned and went back to the kitchen. As soon as I was done with my omelette rice, I wouldn't have any more business here.
幸せそうですね、玉森さん。
ああ、3時間待った甲斐がある。
3 hours!
君というやつは本当に。
You've been on lunch break for 3 hours. Dude, the shop has been left alone for so long. Okay, we're finally transitioning back into the streetcar. It was raining. It's always raining. And the streetcar was packed. That was probably because it would have been a huge pain to walk around in this humidity. And it's also raining. For me, using the streetcar to go 2.5 miles had nothing to do whether it was rainy or cloudy. When I happened to look outside, I saw 3 umbrellas spinning as they ran by. I recognized those guys. The guys from the bathhouse?
お風呂屋で見た子たちですね。
The moment I prayed they wouldn't get on, they noisily jumped onto the streetcar. I figured I'd move to the back to make room for the brats, but
あ、昨日の浪人生じゃねえか。
they have faces now.
ヒューヒュー。
Are you wearing a turtleneck? What era is this?
なんだその冷やかしは。意味がわからん。
もっと奥詰めろよ。俺たちが乗れねえだろ。
そうだそうだ。
Oh god, your hair. Your hair is like a pole, electric pole. That's what I was trying to do.
な、貴様ら。ここは公共の場だ。見よ、この冷ややかな視線に気づかぬか。
I said that, but when I glanced around, everyone's looking out the window and pretending not to notice us. I understand, that's what happens. They weren't completely indifferent, though. In the glass of the window, my eyes met those of an unfamiliar man. If you feel the same way, say something.
いいから静かにしていろよ。
I stepped farther back and was instantly jostled by the crowd and dropped my umbrella. I tried to pick it up, but I was so squished I couldn't move. This is the worst situation. That's when a pale hand picked it up. Pale hand? Eyepatch guy?
これ、
Oh,
どうぞ。
electric pole young man.
もうすまない。
おい、何拾ってんだよ。
Because he's a nice young man.
つい、ごめん。
お前はほんと優しいな。
This guy looks like he's from another era and he looks like, I don't know, like Korean. What is this haircut? What are those glasses?
なんだかお兄さんがかわいそうで。
かわいそうなわけあるか。こいつは痛いけな少年に突然話しかける不審者なんだぞ。
Weren't you guys the ones who talked to him first, like now? I know that was a bathhouse, but... What? That was how they saw me?
そうだ。昨日も言ったが、こいつも監視対象だってことを忘れるな。
Surveillance target.
でも、昨日話しかけてきたのは、僕たち不正規連隊の仲間になりたかっただけかも。
Secret group. Naming a simple group of delinquents, irregulars regiment was pretty over the top. I was an adult. I had no intention of hanging out those who were less mature. Only able to move one hand, I pat the somewhat well-behaved one's head, then hid myself deeper into the crowd. I was unbelievably thankful the next stop was Jinbocho. It's nighttime. I didn't want to be in that cramped car any longer than necessary. As the streetcar passed me by, the twerps pressed against the window and made weird faces, but I no longer paid them any mind. As long as I didn't ride the streetcar around this time of day, I wouldn't run into them. As long as I didn't go to the bathhouse around the same time as before, I'd be able to avoid them. But why were they making fun of me? Yeah, kids don't need any big reason, man. The waitress at the cafe seemed to be too. In the beginning, she'd been even more kind of condescending. There were times where she wouldn't bring me a spoon no matter how many times I asked. Isn't that... Can you get fired? That wasn't the only time I'd been viewed as an idiot. I'll never forget it. 2 years ago, we met an elderly man on the train heading to the capital. He had been somewhere between 75 and 80. He was a master of Ikeda manner, and he would eventually take in Kawase as an adopted son. Ikeda, that mysterious old man who didn't know how much longer he had left, had grown quite fond of us young men making our way to the capital to become the future of the nation, and told us we could rent a room in his mansion. Thank you for your kind offer, but we're already being taken of by a person named Oizumi. Don't bore him with all that, Minakami. Yeah, he's offering to do us a favor. We might as well not waste it. Minakami has sighed and said, "Please take care of these two," as he bowed his head. When he told us he wanted to adopt us, the conversation gradually snowballed. At his sudden proposal, the grandparents I'd left behind in the country crossed my mind, so I of course hesitated, but Kawase had immediately accepted. Orphan? He had no one who came to mind back in the country. Right when this joke we shared as we traveled started to have a tinge of truth to it, something happened that destroyed all my hopes. Someone has stolen my luggage. A young man with his hat worn low had gone off with my bag, which I'd left in the aisle. With monkey-like reflexes, or maybe he really was a monkey, the thief had escaped my grasp. "Hey, you!" Before he could even reach the second car, he was jostled by the crowd and started to slow down. I figured that now I'd be able to catch him, but he passed it along to the next thief. Oh, this is a relay race. Honestly, I was also slowing down from exhaustion. Even when I yelled out, "Thief!" it was drowned by the sounds of the crowd, and the train as I was pushed farther back. When he tried to disappear in the third rail car, Minakami shouted as loud as he could. "A bag with 300 yen in it was stolen. Whoever gets it back will get half." But what a huge lie! Well, look. Just like Minakami said, the look in everyone's eyes had changed. With the power of maturity, my bag was instantly taken back from the thief and was suddenly being passed above the heads of the crowd. The moment it was finally back in my hands, the buckle on my bag snapped. What fluttered down inside the car were my manuscripts, and more manuscripts. Some greedy miser might have tried to wrench my bag open by force. One page was swept away by the wind, and one fell into some far-sighted old lady's hand. Some landed on the heads of innocent bystanders, and one fell by my feet. Actually, it fell by Kawase's and Ikeda-san's feet as they came up to me at Minakami. "Tamamorika, what's the meaning of this?" Weren't you going to go to the capital to study to be a doctor?" Of course. They say you know what goes on in a person's head by the contents of their bag, but what's all this?" "You should learn from Kawase-kun." I don't really want to remember what happened after that. I'd gotten drunk and ended up between two of the rail cars, sobbing on and on. Minakami was the only one who had me go back to my seat with a worried look on his face. Anyway, I'd fooled Ikeda-san at first, and even the shopkeeper at Umebachito. I mean, even if I had used some underhanded techniques, why were children the only ones who didn't fall for it? That was probably why I would never like children, for as long as I lived. When the sun had completely set and I got back to Umebachito, a man was there twirling his umbrella. He seemed bored. Eyepatch guy? No. He stopped, startled, when he saw me making my way back.
Konbanwa. Konbanwa.
Is he waiting for us? Or the store to open?
お店、今日はお休みなんですか?
今開けます。
I said, as I put my hands on the doors.
鍵とかないんですね。
何か?
いえ、何でもありません。
He was kind of a gloomy guy. I told him to come in, but he just fidgeted, showing no signs of entering.
今日は本を買いに来たんじゃないです。
Did you come here to see me?
え?
えっと。
金魚上路、返してほしいなら返します。
いえ。
It must have been something that was pretty important to him. It's not like I wouldn't return it if he told me to. But he waved his hands and shook his head as if to tell me not to worry about it.
もらってください。それは君への贈り物みたいなものですから。
I think he likes us.
はあ？お名前は？
僕、氷川と申します。
氷川。
すみません。失礼ですが、あなたと以前会いましたっけ？
え？
いかんせん、興味のないことはすぐ忘れてしまうもので。
Oh, straightforward.
いえ、僕が君に出会ったのは1ヶ月前が初めてです。
A month ago. That was when I began working at Umebachito, so of course the name Hikawa wouldn't sound familiar to me. I knew it. He was a weird one.
とある本を探していて、この梅鉢堂なら題名だけで本を探せると噂に聞き、やってきたのが始まりでした。
長くなりそうですか？
ごめんなさい。
He eventually closed his umbrella and came inside.
実は僕、君の原稿を読んだのは昨日が初めてじゃないんです。初めてこの店に来た時も、君は床に突っ伏して原稿を書いていました。
I like this
それを
face.
勝手に読んでしまったんです。
I like this face that we make here, this one. But also, this Hikawa guy, 100% another guarantee he likes us. For real. I know it. And he's gonna be a bit creepy about it, I think.
鳩人間と物乞いのお話とか、キャラメルと三角定規が格闘するお話とか、面白くて。
It didn't feel so bad to hear all that. I grinned as I took a step closer to him.
さっき伺ったお名前、何でしたっけ？
Hikawa.
氷川喜十郎と申します。博士と呼んでください。
Hakase? Why?
博士？
I wasn't even going to ask what his field of study was. Maybe professor was something like a nickname. If it was a nickname, I had one too.
私は玉も。
玉森くんですよね。
How does he know our name?
え？
原稿の著名にそう書いてありましたから。嬉しいな。こうして君の名前を口にできるなんて。
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no, Tamamori, what have you got yourself into? Formerly a weirdo, currently a nutcase.
それで探していた本は見つかったんですか？
いえ、でももういいんです。
Oh no.
僕は今君の原稿に夢中なので。
Oh no. Oh no, Tamamori, get out of there, Tamamori!
私の原稿に。
The hole has already been dug. The man, or rather, professor, was slowly coming closer.
今日店番が終わったら僕の家に来てくれませんか？
Yo, don't do that, dude. Look at the look in his eyes.
え？
君とじっくり、それはじっくりとお話ししたくて、今日はお誘いに参ったのです。
Even if this happened in real life, you should not do something like this. Also, we have a movie to go through tonight, so...
申し訳ありませんが、私は浪人生の身。怠惰に過ごしている時間はないのです。
Man, he's so straightforward.
そういうことですので。
But I like that. I like that. We need a personality like this in this game.
いつなら時間をいただけますか
1年はかかるでし
He
ょ
sounds so sad, though.
残念です。実はもう君をもてなす茶菓子や料理も用意してしまっていて。
No, that's on you, man.
う。茶菓子と料理？
Oh no, I forgot we were poor. Fuck.
はい。
1年と言いましたが、ちょうど明日の夜が空いています。
Yep, there we go.
本当ですか？
Man, this guy.
はい。今日の夜でもよかったのですが、東洋キネマの方に野暮用がありまして。
活動写真に？お忙しいんじゃ。
活動写真は風俗研究の一環です。それを怠惰と捉えますか？
He is such a professional, like, bullshitter. I really appreciate this.
ごめんなさい、ごめんなさい。嫌わないでください。
Okay, I understand this personality. It's going to be the... Oh, he's so unhingedly obsessed. This we call neurotic on the personality scale. He has high neuroticism. As his face turned red, Professor withdrew like a turtle hiding from harassment.
それでは明日の夜、君を迎えに行きます。それでは。
Hi. And with a somewhat nervous look on his face, he skipped away. Even though I'd been lured by tea snacks into accepting, the day itself was guaranteed to be a pain. It depended on how I happened to be feeling when the time came. I honestly couldn't have cared less whether he liked me or not. It was 5 o'clock in the evening. I still had time before the movie. When's the movie? I would have liked an airplane, though, I muttered by the register as I rocked the goldfish watering can Professor had given me. Movies time? I'd had a feeling, but no customers came after that. The shopkeeper hadn't returned either. Long walk. It was time to close up shop. so I shut the doors and started walking towards Toyo Cinema. When I began to stroll down Hakusan Street, I heard angry shouting coming from somewhere.
もう一度言ってみろ。聞こえねえのか？この税金泥棒が。
I looked across the street and saw a soldier and a drunk arguing. After the navy had been reduced and disarmament enforced, the harsh criticism soldiers received had gotten worse, despite their pampered status not so long ago. The military was getting hit hard. Now, the world was a rough place for soldiers. Maybe someone like me, who was hooked on tea and sweets, had it good. There was a crowd forming outside of Toyo Cinema, so the show must have been starting soon. Toyo Cinema was a movie theater that had opened a year ago. And if that wasn't awesome enough, in order to attract customers, it would borrow films, like today's movie, from Nikkatsu and rerun them. It felt kind of strange when I thought about how all the people here liked horror films. It wasn't as crowded as Asakusa Roku, but I liked it here more, with its gloomy atmosphere. When the doors opened, the crowd began to move. I figured if I stood there, Minakami would show up eventually. What if he's already inside? I strained my eyes, but I couldn't find that kappa head of his at all. Maybe he'd gotten lost in the crowd. Maybe he's already inside. For now, I looked at the ticket and checked my seat number. I wasn't a child. Things came up. Shit happened. I followed the back of the crowd and entered Toyo Cinema. What if he's already inside? I walked by the people who were already seated and sat down in my own seat. The one next to me was completely empty, of course. 5, then 10 minutes went by, but he didn't seem to be coming. Eventually, all the seats except Minakami's had been filled, and the entrance was blocked by the standing customers. Minakami, I'm not sure if your luck is really good or really bad. I crushed the damp half ticket in my hand, then stuffed it deep into my pocket. I get it. Now then, let the curtain rise. Tamamori's story. When it comes to the right eye, there's also a left. A right hand and a left hand, a right brain and a left brain. The body is split into two halves, and the right brain controls the left side of the body, and the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. You only have one heart and one stomach, but there is more than enough proof that people can have two personalities. Dr. Jekyll was a man wavering between good and evil. Through rigorous research to find the evil within him, he eventually awakens the scoundrel Mr. Hyde. Split personalities, which used to be a entry in the DSM, but now has been removed, I think. I had never doubted that I was me. That may have been because I knew I was a half-assed person and accepted my own darkness. The movie was over. People began to silently head home. A horrible man let out a long yawn. I watched the crowd leave as I glanced at the empty seat beside me. Dude, Minakami, did someone kill him? It was a seat right in the center. If Minakami had tried to come in after the film started, people would have complained. So he wouldn't have any other choice than to stand and watch. Suddenly, someone came up behind me. Minakami?
遅かったな。
Oh my god, what are with your eyes? The person standing beside me was the caramel seller.
本日の上映は終了しました。
When I finally looked around, I saw that the theater really was empty.
連れが戻ってこないのだ。
お連れさんってどんな方？
おかっぱ頭で目が細く。
ああ、その人知ってますよ。でも今晩の上映は来ていないと思います。
ならなぜあいつを知っているのだ？
He came here before.
今日の昼に来ていたからです。
He come to the matinee showing of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? Oh no, this is a bad feeling.
何？
お兄さん、その人のこと調べてるんすか？
調べてるというわけではないが。
What did this mean? We had definitely agreed to meet for the evening show. Perhaps seeing through my shortcomings, the caramel seller smiled cruelly.
これ以上聞きたいなら、それ相当のものくれないと。
And kids in this city are just...
遅くまでご苦労。もう結構だ。
The look he made told me he didn't care. I stood up from my seat and passed the frigid guy. As usual, it was pouring outside. I stared out at the rain for a while, the lightning flashing down. I returned to the lobby, but no matter how long I waited, it didn't look like Minakami was coming. A fly tirelessly flew around and around an exposed light bulb. I found myself starting to fidget as I watched its shadow on the floor. I was annoyed. Annoyed. It was making me wait alone in a place like this.
あれ、お兄さんまだいたの？今日の上映は終わりですよ。
わかっている。
約束の時間、間違えちゃったんじゃないですか？
断じてない。
どうだか。お兄さん抜けてそうだし。
私は客だぞ。なんだその口の利き方は。
常識ある客なら閉店前に帰ってください。
Why was everyone treating me with such contempt? I directed my childish rage towards Minakami. Minakami's story. Minakami was a pretty mysterious guy. What made him mysterious was something not even I as a writer could explain. How could I put it? He was way too nice. He was always smiling. No matter what kind of foolish thing Kawase or I did, it may have shocked him, but it never made him hate us. When I told him, look, a bird is flying by, he took his eyes away from his book and said, so there is. He'd once read a book on the different species of birds. That's why I brought up the subject. But he didn't say anything else. It was only when I asked him about how birds fly that he began to gush. Quiet and reserved, Minakami was a walking encyclopedia. Man, I love him more and more. I had the feeling that he was like a deep lake that made no waves. That's the kind of guy Minakami was. It was mysterious, even for him, to make plans but then go see the same film at noon and disappear at night. Alright, it was mysterious. Anyway, there was only one way to get rid of this uncomfortable feeling. Go ask him? Communication? I crossed Suido Bridge and headed towards Koshikawa. His house? That was where the nostalgic Oizumi residence was. The madame of the house hated me. She would even give Minakami more food than me during meals. The snake-eyed umbrella that old hag carried around really suited her. I obviously couldn't ask her directly if Minakami was home. If I circled around to the back, his room would be... At that moment, the sliding door rattled open and Madame came out. I immediately hid behind a telephone pole.
Ara.
Madame, your voice. The old hag really was sharp.
そこのオンボロ傘はタマさんじゃありませんか。ごきげんよう。
I know this voice.
ごきげんよう。
何用かしら。
今日は
私急いでますの。
すみません。何でもありません。
そう。私これからお留守にするけど、勝手に上がらないでちょうだいね。
水上は。
ああ。皆さんなら活動写真に行くとかで出かけましたわ。
え？
怪奇映画の招待券を差し上げたのよ。
出かけたのはいつ頃ですか？
The old woman grinned.
何も知らないということは、何も聞かされていないということ。
Is the whole town against us? What is this? Although it's probably our fault if it is like that.
私も詳しいことは知りませんけど、あなたよりは暇なことはしていないでしょうよ。
She stared at me as if evaluating my worth, then started to hurry past. Suddenly, she stopped right next to me and scoffed.
靴だけはおきれいね。
ありがとうございます。 褒めてるんじゃないの。せいぜいきれいに使いなさい。
Leaving me with her confusing insults, she disappeared into the fog. I felt the years of my life return when the sound of her footsteps vanished. But why wasn't Minakami home? I doubted he was still at the Imperial University's library. With nowhere to go, I stood there for a while. That was when a young man ran right past me. This town is full of young men.
直し君。
The eyes of these NPCs.
ちょっと待ってくれ、話を。
He had already disappeared into the house. I helplessly pulled back my outstretched hand and put it into my sleeve. I let out a sigh for the 100th time. Naoshi Oizumi, Naoshi-kun, was Madame's only son. He didn't go to school because he was sickly or something, but it wasn't like he was a shut-in. He hung around Jinbocho. He didn't seem to have a very good relationship with Madame, so they purposely went out of their way to avoid each other. That alone was reason enough for Naoshi-kun and I to get along, although it doesn't really seem like that, does it? I want to come in and visit you, Naoshi-kun. He would probably see it through a scheme like that. I ended up circling around to the back of the house and peeking through the gaps in the fence in front of Minakami's room. The lights weren't on. It didn't look like he had come home, just like Madame said. I pulled my face away from the fence and shook off the droplets of water. Then lifted my chilled head towards the rainy sky once more. Had I made some kind of mistake? Maybe we weren't supposed to meet at Toyo Cinema, but at Suido Bridge. We had met up at Suido Bridge both times we went to Asakusa's Junikai, and when we went to Ginza. But when we went to Toyo Cinema last month, we had met up at the theater. There was one last possibility. Maybe we hadn't really had plans to meet in the first place. No. Was it all a hallucination? I rode the streetcar in total confusion and returned to Umebachito in a daze. Lightning spilled into my room before I could even turn on the light. That's when I saw the unbelievable scene before me.
No!
My goldfish was floating. When I turned on the light, the unmistakable reality finally burned itself into my eyes. When I fell to my knees and got closer, the strong smell of death hit my nose. I was in total shock. I folded an error-laden manuscript and placed it over the fishbowl. They say goldfish don't die. They ascend to that big fishbowl in the sky. It felt better to say it about a fish that had passed away on its own than one that died on a cutting board. Well, that was the gist of it anyway. I wasn't sure what made this goldfish special, or even what sort of personality he'd had, but I avoid using the word died. It wasn't out of affection, but because I knew that death was something repulsive. Once it stopped raining, I'd give it a proper burial. I lay down in a futon I never bothered to put away, and remembered Minakami. Sometimes I can still hear his voice. The guy had probably gone off somewhere. For some reason, I was surprised how quickly I accepted that. The rain beat steadily against the window.